Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Shubaan FC podcast with my guest, with my co-star Adil Goda and my guest Shubaan.
My name's Lala. Well, it's
Lala.
Intikab, but people know me as
Intikab.
Lala. Yeah,
Lala,
that's
yeah.
right. Yes.
I did not
What's
know.
your name? Sorry.
Mustaqim.
Mustaqim. And
Yeah,
Adil,
he has a funny name, yeah.
How's it going?
Alhamdulillah, it's good.
You guys okay?
Yeah.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, not too bad. Not too bad. So what are we talking about today?
Today's topic's about Shubaan and
Yeah.
how did it start and stuff.
Can you tell
Okay.
us how you started all this?
Yeah, I can tell you how it started. Back in sort of 2002, we started Shubaan Youth Group in December 2002. In actual fact, we started it sort of doing the research behind it sort of between September and November of 2002. Some of the things we learned was that there was a gap for young people in the area, certainly in Highfields and Spinney Hills, for youth provision. And when we sort of kind of learned that, did a bit of research, did a bit of outreach work, spoke to people, we realised that there was much needed youth provision required within, Highfields.
Yeah.
In particular, for obviously children from our community who, on a weekday between Monday to Friday, they normally go madrasa.
Yeah.
Do you understand? So you go to school, you come home for a little while, and then you're back at madrasa 5 to 7:30 Monday to Friday. In terms of recreational time, most youth clubs weren't open at the weekend. So
Yeah.
that's how we started. We realised that there was a gap for our children, in the community, to have somewhere to have recreational space, engage in sports, have facilities that enables them to kind of further themselves, not only kind of through sports, but also through education,
Yeah.
recreation, socialising. And so we decided that on a Saturday in the afternoon, in actual fact, I wasn't part of the initial setup.
How you were?
No, but I'll come to that in a little while. So the colleagues that set Shubaan up in 2002 rather, in December, did so at Wesley Hall. And they offered a youth provision that included things like table tennis, pool, board games.
So basically how it was before we moved here.
Sorry?
It was basically how it was before we moved to Highfields.
Yeah, a little bit like what we did in the last 6
Okay,
weeks
yeah.
before Christmas. It was a bit like that on a Saturday
Yeah.
afternoon. So it was 2 till 4. There were sports provided, and if you wanted sports activities, they'd go in the park, board games, table tennis, pool table, just a safe space for young people to come and socialise. And as I say, most of the youth that would come were
Yeah.
ones that were busy during the week, Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. That's how we set up, and we were there probably for about 2 years, I think. So between sort of December 2002, in actual fact, it was a bit longer. I think it went up to about October 2005. So that first 3 years of Shubaan being set up, it was all within Wesley Hall. And then within that time, there was some additional kind of extracurricular stuff that we did. So I think their first trip, again, I never got involved until
Yeah,
about
you did.
2006. But in 2005, they did in 2004 actually, they did a trip to the History Museum in London. They did a couple of charity activities. One was we're raising money for Loros.
Yeah.
So we got the young people involved in raising money for Loros. We did a bikes charity. I think, again, there was a Bikes for All type program where everybody got a bike, and we did a charity bike in Abbey Park and raised money for charity. So that's how we started. It was through, a small group of volunteers. There was about 3 or 4 people, most of whom, the original people who set this up, are supporters of Shubaan but aren't actively engaged in Shubaan. They've obviously, much like yourself, the youth that use the services have now taken upon themselves to kind of start becoming volunteers and running Shubaan. So that was the early days.
So what was the aim for Shubaan?
That's a good
what were you aiming
question.
to do?
I think the main thing was to ensure that, one, there was a provision for those kids that couldn't get recreation in social activities
Yeah.
during the week. That was one of the
Yeah.
key things. But in addition to that, to provide safe space for people to socialise, to improve attainment, engagement with, peers, to ensure that the children of the community weren't missing out on provision that was readily available possibly at that time during the weekdays, but not necessarily available during the weekends. So that was kind of the key aim, and obviously there was a gap which wasn't catered for.
Yeah.
And so the ones who set it up and originally constituted Shubaan as a community-based youth group, they saw that, they realised that, and they wanted to make sure that people engaged in, you know, activities had the ability to empower themselves. Because, as you know, where we live, Spinney Hills, Highfields,
Yeah.
obviously it's a deprived area, you know. So the idea was to try and make sure that people were, their attainment was improved, their social element, social ability to engage with others from people outside the community, all of those things, you know. So that's pretty much what the aims were.
Okay.
How come you stopped doing it after 2005?
We didn't, in actual fact.
Did you
So
move?
no. So I joined Shubaan probably sort of late 2005, early 2006, I think. But I was aware of what Shubaan were doing at the
Yeah.
time. It was a lot of friends that I was aware of that were actually involved in delivering services in Shubaan. So we didn't stop. In actual fact, in October 2005, we moved away from Wesley Hall.
Yeah.
And I don't know the reasons why, but we moved away from Wesley Hall and we came to Highfields Centre. And from 2005 right up to 2012, for 7 years, we were actually based on a Saturday between sort of 3 and 5 p.m., I remember, at Wesley Hall, at Highfields Centre.
Yeah.
And we were limited in what we could provide because unlike Wesley Hall, where you had, you know, the pool table, the table tennis, table football, the board games, here we primarily focused on activities within the sports hall.
Yeah.
And we weren't able to use any of the other facilities that were available at the
Also
time.
the upstairs bit. Yeah.
So we had limited access to any of that. Despite wanting to, you know, we weren't able to. So we focused in on activities in the sports hall, and usually the attendees that came, all they wanted to do was play football. So we used to have 2 split hours. So the first hour, sort of 3 till 4, we'd have the younger children, sort of 7, 8 upwards to about 11 or 12. They'd play an hour of football, and we'd kind of move them out, and then you'd get the older ones, sort of 11, 12, up to 16, and they'd come and play an hour of football. I can't remember whether the youth wing was actually built by then, but when the youth wing was built and the additional services within Centre was available, we did try, but we weren't successful, and there was a number of reasons, you know, within, you know, why we might have not have got it, but that was always something we wanted to do. We always wanted to make sure that we could try and get the youth wing, the youth facilities here. So from 2005 right up to 2012, you know, we went through the weekly football, unable to use the additional facilities that were available in the centre. We did a lot of outside stuff. So we were involved in engagement with the council to deliver some activities for our young people on the prevent agenda at the time, which was quite a bit of a hot topic, albeit, you know, if you look into it, has a lot of flaws, and it's not something we wholly agree with because it targets the Muslim community. But at the time, we did a bit of work around that, and through that, we took out the children who used to attend to our first residential in 2007. We went to a place called the Peak Centre. If you look at our Facebook pages, that's available. You know, you can see the pictures on there, and within that, you can see that we were doing activities that you wouldn't ordinarily associate with children from area of Highfield. So we did walks out in the countryside. We climbed up Mamtor. We walked all the way to Castleton. We did archery. And there was outdoor football and bits and pieces available. We did a barbecue with the kids. But that was the first time we actually took about 40 odd children, young people, out into a residential trip. And sort of between 2005 and right up to 2012, there was various other sort of kind of activities. So we did lots of day trips, Drayton Manor, your regular sort of stuff. And then obviously we worked doing trips to sort of things that you wouldn't ordinarily, associate with kind of youth groups. But we took the children down to Parliament. We were invited to the Foreign Office on a couple of occasions. We were actually invited to the Foreign Office for an Eid party as well. So there's quite a few young people in the area of Highfields and probably now have kind of moved out.
Yeah.
And in particular, obviously, one of our volunteers now, Ayub Patel, you know Ayub, don't you?
Yeah.
He was one of our service users, and we took him to the Foreign Office. And he's one of our success stories because he said at the time we were in a bit of a room having a bit of a debate with what was a civil servant at the time working within, a diplomat within the Foreign Office. And he jokingly said at the time, I'm going to come back here and work here. He was probably 10, 11 at the time. And in actual fact, he works at the Foreign Office now.
Yeah.
He works in London, in Whitehall at the Foreign Office. So, mashallah, you can't get any better than that. And now he's a volunteer at Shubaan. So, those were the real success stories. But again, within that time, we were challenged. We couldn't use the facilities here. We were limited in our scope in what we could do, and that was always disappointing.
Yeah, how do you think Shubaan's improved from when you first started to, say, today?
I think one of the key things, so between 2012 and 2014, for a number of reasons, primarily because of our resource, because we've always been volunteer-run and volunteer-led. So although we're a community-based youth group, we have no paid staff. And we had a very small volunteer pool at the time. And so, what happened was we did it for a solid 7 years, lots of activities, the weekly football, commitment. And then the volunteers at the time sort of became responsible for families, for children, work, etc. And then we ran out of this sort of kind of steam that you needed, so to speak, to continue with it. So between 2012 and 2014, there was no Shubaan. It was still there as a constituted group, but it wasn't running sort of regular activities. And that was the only time where we've had in the last 20 years limited youth provision being delivered by Shubaan. But in terms of improvement, since, if I look back over the last sort of 15, 17 years that I've been involved, the number of volunteers that we've got, is huge. So that's a massive improvement to when we originally set up as Shubaan, because there was only 3, 4, 5 of us at the time. In terms of the activities that we provide, now certainly being at Highfields Centre, in terms of the variety of activities that we can provide. So we're sitting in here doing a podcast, obviously that's something I'd never dream of, and the fact that we're doing our third podcast and it's on the history of Shubaan, being asked questions about Shubaan by the users of Shubaan, that's where we are now. But, we would only dream of doing something like this, 10, 15 years ago. So, it's improved hugely, both in terms of service provision, both in terms of our standing in the community. It's much more recognised by people. And there's a lot of traction on social media. So the awareness of what we do, is huge. I think the other thing is that, without the likes of yourself, there is no Shubaan. So, that's the key thing. How do we continue to attract people like you coming to the provision? It requires some element of kind of, not only enthusiasm on our part, but obviously for us to make sure that you're actively engaged, we have to make it exciting for you guys. So that's what we're trying to do. But, to answer your question, we've been supported by the likes of the council with funding. Certainly our councillors, our local councillors have been very supportive. We've been involved and engaged in various charitable activities over the years. And we've been supported by various groups and people as well. So, between 2012 and 2014, when we had no provision, continually we were told by people within the community, when is Shubaan going to have its weekly sessions again, And we were encouraged by one group in particular, and supported by them to get back our weekly sessions, and that's what we did.